I've done that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording from now.
Okay.
Hi everyone, and welcome to live stream number 2 on January the 5th, 2022. We made it back for a second one, Paul.
Yes, we have. Although I'm looking at the YouTube screen, David, and I cannot see anything, so I'm not
That's good.
100% confident that we are working.
Yeah, no, we're definitely working. I trust me, I'm a nurse. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's great. It's great to have everyone here again for this little bit of a live stream. We do really appreciate you taking the time, and we've got a few things to discuss today, Paul.
Yes.
So let's kick off with. Thankfully, I didn't actually trawl for, and I don't mean this in a flippant way. I didn't trawl for any keyboard players of note that have passed away since our last live stream. So I know there have
Ah,
been some, uh, and I think I'm just getting an echo now, Paul. That's it. Um, Christine McVie, I think, occurred since we last live streamed, unless,
yes.
yeah, which was obviously a huge thing. Or maybe I did talk about her. That's the thing. Life becomes a blur. But we won't talk about passed away keyboard players. I thought we'd move on to something a little bit different this time. So we've got a few questions even
Sure.
from our viewers and listeners, which is hugely appreciated. But I thought we'd just kick off with a general thing. We're starting a new year, Paul. Last year was a bit of a mixed one for anyone that plays keyboards, particularly in live, as far as COVID, lockdowns, the hospitality industry struggling, all that sort of stuff. What was your experience sort of towards the end of 2022, and what's your forecast, at least locally, for how your gigging life is going to be?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly where I live, and where I guess where we're lucky to live, David, in Australia, it did open up quite a bit towards the back end of last year. And it seems like at this stage, and I guess here's the tricky thing: we don't know if there's going to be some new variants going to come down the pipe, or which could be a complete game changer. And I've learned over the last couple of years not to get too confident when things start to open up or what have you. But certainly, what's actually happened is there's actually a glut of music happening now. So what a lot of the artists who weren't able to travel and tour and perform, especially the higher end artists, are now booking out venues like crazy. So we're certainly finding in one of my bands, David, we're having to get very, very proactive around booking a long way in advance just to get venue availability, because things have opened up and it's almost like too much. There's too much music going on. In fact, we played a show with Echoes of Pink Floyd in Adelaide just at the start of December. And I remember the venue owner said to us, "Gee, we're delighted with the number of people that turned up, particularly at the moment because there's so much music on offer. People are being very, very judicious around what they go and watch." So, to answer the second part of your question, I think again, barring something unusual happening, touch wood, I feel like this will continue, and I think from an Australian government point of view, I think they've realised that shutting down whole sectors of industry, particularly the arts, is not helpful to anyone. So I'd like to think that with caution and with still being sensible about if we're ill, not going out, and maybe using a mask if we don't want to spread things to other people. I feel like there's some light at the end of the tunnel, David. That's sort of
Yeah.
my feeling. It'd be interesting to reflect on how it might be affecting you and also around the world.
Yeah, so really keen to hear from our chat participants, and a big hi to Greg, Tammy, and Walter, and others are joining too. I can see, so that's great. Yeah, look, locally for me, I think you raise a good point about venues actually madly booking stuff themselves. So, for example, next year, in one project I'm involved with, we've essentially been booked every month for 12 months.
Mm.
Right. So, and that's the venue just wanting to nail down the whole year's worth of stuff. So essentially booking 48 gigs, 48 weeks worth of gigs up front, which I've never seen before in respect of that. I think COVID is still a worry. The variants are a worry. Coming from that sort of health background, we're not through it yet. The mask
Mm.
stuff you say, I think is very valuable. I still tend to load into a gig, um, play the sets, and get out of the building as much as I can without being absolutely rude to people that want to come up and have a chat, and minimize my contact just to avoid getting sick. So yeah, I think in the Australian scene, you're right. Every venue is booked up. The international acts, if they can afford it, are wanting desperately to get out here during the US and UK winters if they can.
Mm.
I know I'm just on, not even on music, on comedy. I think I've worked out I'm going to 7 comedy gigs in the next two
Right.
months. Let alone any music gigs I've got coming up. So yeah, I think, but I'm really interested to see. From our chat participants, how you're finding it too. I know Walter, you're obviously in South America, um, and Tammy in Canada and Greg in America and that as well. It seems to be pretty much the same everywhere. And when I was lucky enough to be in New York to watch New Order and Pet Shop Boys, that the place was packed. It certainly New York had the feel of somewhere that had gotten back to normal, at least psychologically.
Yeah, and I think that psychological point you make, David, is a good one, because I know, having a lot of friends in Victoria, which was a very, very locked down part of Australia. It was really, and friends and also people I work with, and it was becoming quite a drag psychologically, just having to be locked down all the time and not being able to go out and do things, and a lot of frustration there. So I think the psychological aspect shouldn't be underestimated. And as our viewers and listeners may or may not know, David is a health professional, so you'd probably have a keener insight into how that's impacting people than I would. But just anecdotally, I've certainly seen it's been great just to be able to go out and do things, and people be able to celebrate Christmas properly, for
Yeah,
example, is a
absolutely.
really good example.
Yeah, and I mean we're very lucky down here. I think most people realise in Australia we don't have much snow anywhere on the continent really, and so Christmas for us tends to be uh, in Fahrenheit, 90 to 100-degree days, and 30 to 40-degree days, and definitely no snow. So it was nice to be able to relax in the sun a little bit. So yeah, we'll just keep plugging away at that as we do this live stream. The other one,
I see. Sorry to interrupt you, David. I see Greg sort of made a similar observation to us, in the sense of being a real glut of bands trying to book venues, and so it's been harder to get in and necessarily book. So venues drying up. Everyone trying to book, fewer venues available. So it sounds like that might be a problem
yeah,
elsewhere, not just here in Australia, mate.
and I assume exacerbated by the fact that I know locally that we've lost some venues due to COVID, and I know in the US that's
Mm.
been a real issue in particular cities as well. So yeah, that
Yeah,
doesn't
and
help.
actually, there's a really, the name of it's going to escape me now, but a really prominent and well-loved live venue in Queensland, which which just shut. And the reason they gave was simply they just couldn't get through COVID. Just that they weren't able to book enough. What was happening? Bands were booking, but then were having to cancel at the last minute because the bass player got COVID or something like that. So they were in a situation where a lot of bands were cancelling at the last minute, and that's just not sustainable when you're trying to run the business and paying for staff and that sort of thing. So they had to shut their doors permanently, which is a terrible tragedy,
Yeah,
to be honest. And I know this because we were booked to play a show there with one of the bands I work with, and we had to find a new venue. So, but yeah, that's certainly something to consider too. Venues may have actually had to shut their doors, which may now be contributing to a supply and demand problem for getting
that's
gig
right.
bookings.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't help. And I noticed, Tammy, you said there too that in Canada things are pretty much back to normal, and that was certainly the vibe. I said again, having been lucky enough to be in Canada second half of last year, it certainly did seem that there was nothing holding things back, in spite of still lots of variants um, and stuff like that. So yeah, we shall see how that pans out. Um, Now, just a totally different topic. Walter's just jumped in on chat and says, "So, how's the Nick Rhodes interview coming?" So, Walter, Nick Rhodes and Duran Duran would have to have some of the most opaque, management contact details I've ever come across. So I spend a lot of time tracking down guests, and I have to say, Nick has been one of the hardest to even find an email address or way of contacting them, and I haven't succeeded to date. So apologies, Walter. It might still be a ways off. But I thought we might just quickly jump in there and just talk about the podcast a little bit. Obviously, we've just wrapped up a two-parter with Steve Nathan. For those of you, and I think most of the people on this chat have already had a listen, Steve was just absolutely incredible, like a lot of our guests, and was a font of knowledge. And it's certainly guests like that help us get other guests, because other guests that may be sort of not sure whether they want to jump on and talk about their history, see people like Steve who are modest, humble, and not the sort of person that loves being out the front of things, still taking the time to chat about stuff. And it's I don't know about you, Paul. Well, I think you agree with this. It's really, I find that the reason it's called the Keyboard Chronicles is I actually love the idea of recording some of these incredible life histories related to keyboards that otherwise may not get the attention they deserve.
Oh, 100%. And this is the thing. And as you always say, David, this is a podcast for notable keyboard players, not necessarily famous keyboard players. And, often the two go hand in hand. But I don't think, as an example, when I was getting ready to go to the office to record the Steve Nathan podcast, my wife said to me, who are you talking to today? And I said, oh, Steve Nathan. And she goes, oh, I haven't heard of him. And I said, just wait. And I read her the list of all the artists off his website that he's worked with. And she goes, oh my God, that's amazing. He's worked with everyone. And as you said, David, for anyone who, a guest who think, oh, gee, I'm not someone who necessarily is an extrovert or want to be up front, or it really doesn't matter. I could name off the top of my head, a heap of our guests who I would not call type A extrovert personalities, but they just have great, interesting stories to tell. They've done amazing things. They've got some very good thoughts and philosophies on keyboard playing, and some great tips and ideas. And I think every experience is valuable. And these people we've been lucky enough to talk to have done amazing things. And maybe they don't see themselves as particularly amazing, but that makes it all the more pleasurable to spend some time and talk to them and draw those chronicles out, as you say.
Yeah, exactly. I sort of feel Nick is not the biggest extrovert. I mean, he's in Duran Duran and is one of the founding members and iconic keyboard players of the last 40 years, but I still don't get the impression he's terribly extroverted. But yeah, we'll keep trying, Walter, but he's definitely on the bucket list. But funnily enough, as the podcast has gone on, we're getting as many people approach us for interviews as we are approaching them, or if not as many, at least sort of solid 30% or so. And as Paul will attest, we've now got something like 7 interviews booked in the next 8 weeks or something. And I'm really pleased to report, because this has been an ongoing focus, I'm trying to get as many female keyboard players on the show as possible. And the next 2 interviews are actually female keyboard players. So I'm very excited by that, because obviously the reality is it is a male dominated industry still. But there are so many amazing female keyboard players. And we've had a couple of them on, like Lisa Belladonna and Lisa Coleman. There's a Lisa issue there. And we've had, total mental blank from Crash Test Dummies. We've had a few female, and Veronica Lewis from the beautiful boogie woogie piano player. So we definitely make an effort there, but I'm really excited that the next 2, I probably won't I'll give one of them away because I know that it's happening this Saturday. And one of them is Jenny Conley, who is keyboard player and actually plays accordion as well as keyboards with one of my favourite bands. And some of our listeners and viewers may know Decemberists. So just think December with ISTS on the end of it. But the Decemberists are an incredibly successful band of nearly 20 years standing now, if not slightly more. And I'm absolutely just pumped to have Jenny on the podcast this weekend when we record. But we've also got someone on the other end of the musical spectrum coming on in the next week or 2 that does a lot of harder rock and really classic Hammond organ stuff and stuff like that. So yeah, there's certainly lots coming up, Paul.
Yeah, we are so lucky to have people queuing up to be interviewed, which is absolutely wonderful. Greg, we definitely have attempted to get John Caron as part of the show, and for those who might not know, I have a massive interest in Pink Floyd, playing in a Pink Floyd tribute here in Australia, and John Caron is someone we would love to speak to, wouldn't we, David? Just the mere fact he's been able to work with Gilmore and Waters and seems to get along well with both of them, and I'd just love to know how he's managed to do that. That's a real achievement, and he's such a multi-talented guy too. And anyone who's seen him, and I'm sure Greg, you're well across this. He's not just playing keyboards, right? He's doing all sorts of stuff. He's doing guitar and vocals, and he's a very integral part of the modern Pink Floyd stage presentation, whether it's with Waters or when Gilmore was touring around as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's been probably at least a year since I've approached John, and might have even been longer. So it might have been early days of the show. So I will, Greg, make another attempt there. And I think from memory, it was only reaching out to John via his Facebook page, again, finding management contacts. So to lift the curtain for our viewers and listeners, the way we approach guests can vary anything from a private message on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook through to very formal contacts via PR contacts or management contacts at the artist's management. And I honestly have varied levels of success with everything. I think I mentioned before, Steve Baccaro was a message on Facebook via his Facebook page that he replied to within 20 minutes, went, yeah, why not? Through to multiple attempts. There's one, I won't mention a name, but there's a keyboard player that their management contact said no. But they've been called out by a number of guests as someone they would love to hear interviewed as well. We did a follow up on the weekend saying, look, still getting lots of people asking to see this person interviewed. Is there any chance you'd reconsider? And that PR person replying within like 5 minutes saying, yeah, still not interested. And it was obvious
Nope.
that they hadn't checked with the artist, and that's fine. That's what PR people do. They're meant to be gatekeepers. But sometimes we believe the artist would probably love to have a chat, but from the PR viewpoint, they don't see it as a priority. And I get that. We're not exactly CNN or MSNBC or Fox or MTV or Rolling Stone, but we'll keep trying. And I'm just looking at the chat. So if you can, now I apologize, Walter. So I was about to say Jesus Molina. I absolutely know. Is it Jesus? Or anyway, I totally get who you mean. I would love to have him on the show as well. It goes without saying. I apologize. I don't know which pronunciation of his name, because I don't hear his name mentioned a lot, but I see him a lot. He's an amazing player. And also Walter's saying the baseball organ player, so Bobby Cressy was among my favourite ones, just on the curiosity of it. And that's the other thing we do try to do is a bit of novelty and find different sorts of players, which is great. So thank you. That's a bit of and so yeah, lots more guests coming up. I did mention last live stream, I'm not going to jinx it by mentioning his name again, but we've got a very iconic one that we're still in negotiations with. That's just dependent on his availability. It's been stretching on for 12 months now. They are definitely keen. It's just about his schedule. And we've got a few others in the fire as well.
You'll die happy, David, if we get this particular guest.
Yeah.
That'll be your crowning.
Be up there with Nick Rhodes.
Absolutely.
So let's jump to a totally different not totally different topic. Tammy submitted some really cool questions that we're still working through, and thank you again, Tammy. One of them that I love is, what band would you love to play keys for? And I'm pretty sure we didn't cover this last live stream. So Paul, one band you can play keys for, who is it? And if we did cover it, it'll be interesting whether we give the same answers.
Let's see if we give the same answer. I know the answer to this. It would be Santana. I love.
I think we have done this, because I think that was your answer last time too.
Yeah. It would, and I mentioned before I get to play in a Pink Floyd tribute. That's like a fantasy come true for me. So it's not like being in Pink Floyd, but it's about as close as I'll ever get. Yeah. I'm no John Caron, so that'd be my one. But I think we may have discussed.
Yeah, that's right. So apologies. That's my housekeeping that's led us down there, but that's cool. And I'm actually going to change mine. I reckon I would have said the E Street Band last time. I'm actually going to go something totally different, which is Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark.
Ooh,
I've been a
OMD.
fan of theirs for OMD for like, well, now be 40 years. Um, and I just love Paul Humphreys' riffs, the way he plays, and it's probably more within my line of capability. A lot of the stuff they do is sequenced, and the actual live lines that Paul plays, none of them are too taxing. So I reckon I could nearly pull that off. You never know.
Well, I think you'd be you undersell your skills, David. You'd be fine at that. And I know you love that sort of music too. So that would be you'd be like a, a pig in shit, as we say here in
That's
Australia.
right. Yeah, and as Paul's just put in chat, we'd love to know what your fantasy band to play in, because I know we'd all have different ideas. So yeah, it'd be really interested to hear your thoughts.
And to answer your question, Walter, no, I've never been in a Santana tribute. I don't actually know of any in the town that I live in.
I was going to say there's one in Sydney, because
Yeah,
a person you and I both know, Mark, he plays intermittently in a
he does.
Santana tribute.
Yeah, he does.
Um,
Yeah, and I've heard them. He's good too. Now that you mention it,
yeah,
yeah.
and obviously we had David Matthews on from Santana, who's still their keyboard player at the moment. And actually, I'm keen to catch up with David again. That was pre-video days. I'd love to get him back on the show. No time though.
Yeah, he was a good guest, David.
He led with his heart and had a lot of really cool insights. So I thought, in between coming back to what comes in chat, bit of prediction. So we're only sort of going to do about half an hour on this live stream, it being sort of a lunchtime. But I've seen both on the musicplayer.com forums and the Keyboard Players and Cover Bands Facebook page some sort of, well, what's on the horizon in 2023, and obviously no one knows, but I thought we just might shoot the breeze a bit on what's potentially coming up from major manufacturers. And so I'll throw to you in a sec, Paul, for your thoughts. I think the one overarching problem that's going to drive whatever comes out is the infamous shortage of chips. That there is a shortage of microchips, I should emphasize, not fried chips or potato chips. There's a shortage of microprocessors and chips for keyboards, computers, all sorts of devices, and it's not going to get better anytime soon with the COVID wave ripping through China at the moment, which I think is responsible for, I don't think it's 90%, but it's some incredible proportion of the world's chip processing. So taking that into account, Paul, what do you think we might see gear?
Well, the big thing, and I should mention, you made me laugh, David, because there is actually a shortage of chips, as like the one
Oh, there is
in
too.
Australia as well. There's been a massive potato shortage due to weather events and things. This is in Australia, so much so that I believe Coles were limiting people to purchasing one bag of frozen chips per customer at some point here in Adelaide. And when I say chips for our North American guests, I'm talking fries. So same kind of thing though. Getting back to the question that you asked, I was in a retail store the other day, one of the biggest music retailers in Adelaide where I live, and I was buying a gift voucher for a friend, but I couldn't help going and nosing my way down to the keyboard section. And I was mucking around with the Korg stuff, because I'm a Korg user and advocate. And the manager of the keyboard department and I got into a deep and meaningful chat about what is going on with Kronos and the potential replacement for that. And we both agree we don't have no idea, but it's interesting. The Nautilus seems to be a wonderful piece of gear from what I can tell, but it doesn't fully replace the functionality that people enjoyed with the Kronos. And maybe I'm old school, but I still feel there's room in the market for that high end, top of the line workstation. Roland seemed to be supporting the Phantom really well. I'm not sure where the Montage is at the moment in terms of support it's getting from Yamaha, but I hope there'll be some kind of Kronos replacement coming in the next year. But I mean, I'm like everyone else. I'm shooting in the dark, David. I don't think it could be absolute rubbish.
But
So
I mean,
Korg,
of them all though, between Montage, Kronos, and Phantom, it's by far and away the oldest. So if any,
yes,
assuming they can get the chips for it,
yes.
yeah, it seems like an obvious one. And just a quick shout out to Joe Mascara's joined us too. Joe is a brilliant guy who I've had the pleasure of spending time face to face with as well as on the Music Player forums. Great to have you here, Joe. And he's suggested some great bands there that he would like to play with. Rolling Stones, yeah, bloody great, great one. Little Feat, yeah, look. Government Mule, and Tedeschi Trucks and Black Crows. That's a hell of a lineup. All 5 of them, yeah, I would kill to be involved with. So, yeah, welcome, Joe.
Yeah, g'day, Joe. And I see Walter's mentioned Michael Jackson, and I know
Oh, yeah.
I know Walter's a big, a very accomplished Michael Jackson tribute artist too. So
Yeah, no, great call. I mean, I would just love to have been. I mean, you've seen it in that documentary, and I apologise, I forgot the one that they were making at the time Michael died. Just seeing the level of attention to detail and the focus of those musicians is just incredible. And also, yeah, on the Nautilus, yeah, half-baked transitional product. I
so
think
Walter has said what I've said, but in a far less politically correct and more forthright manner, I'd say.
yeah, that's right. And I think it's ugly as sin. I've said it before. I love the look of the Chronos. I think the Nautilus is one of the ugliest keyboards I've ever seen. I know that's a big...
Do you know what I like about it though, David? Because I've got a little key Largo which you kindly sold to me, and it's a wonderful bit of gear. And I like to Velcro that to the top of my
Yeah,
keyboard.
there's plenty of
The
spot.
Nautilus,
Yeah.
it's got all that space. And
There
so
is
I think,
plenty
well, the
of
stuff I
space.
could stick on top of that. So
Yeah, that's true.
So yes, it might not be the prettiest thing, but I think from a functionality point of view, I would actually like all that space.
True, and yeah, true, and Joe's made a good point too that keyboard manufacturers don't have the clout that say the Apples and Samsungs do of the world as far as chips. They're always going to be further down the queue, you know, to Apple, Samsung, Sony, maybe to some extent, and those big guys. Yeah.
They don't get those economies of scale, right, that those big tech companies get when they're purchasing. That's the challenge for them.
And the other big manufacturers. I know we make lots of jokes on the podcast and ask guests about Red Keyboard, yes or no. But Nord are an iconic brand. They make really high quality keyboards, although with inflation and the currency conversion, they're just about cost prohibitive unless you're a professional in Australia, at least. That's a big call for me to make. But there's a bit of rumours around, you know, is it time for the Nord Stage 4? Could be. I'm always interested to see what Nord come out with. They're always more iterative in their approach, so you never have something come out that's radically different. Although the Nord, is it the Nord Grand? That was something different for them in the last couple of years. So yeah, I mean they are beautiful keyboards. I sort of regret selling my Electro 5.
Just buy it back. Just buy another Nord. Easy fixed.
Not now. I'm not. They're too damn expensive.
No, they are, and for our non-Australian listeners, viewers, Nords are so expensive to buy new here in Australia. Well, to be fair, they hold their value when you resell them, but they are not cheap keyboards at all. Very expensive.
Yeah, you raise a good point about resale. I think I pretty much got my money back on the Electro 5D.
They do hold their value.
Yeah, that is true. And then, you know, Yamaha, as you said, the Montage has been around a while, but the issue with both Chronos Montage and the main Phantoms, not the 07, 08, 09, 06, 07, 08, is weight. So it just, from a gigging viewpoint, unless you've got a roadie or you're under the age of 40, those flagship keyboards, you really do think twice or even 3 times about cutting them out live. I would kill for a Montage, but I refuse to, you know, cut I think it's like 35 kilo, whatever it is, 35 kilogram keyboard around. It's just ridiculous, particularly if you travel, as I know you do, Paul. You'd literally be, paying 2 excess baggage fees just to take that one keyboard.
Yeah, you just can't. You can't get under the weight limit. So that's the problem. I would never travel a flagship keyboard, but of course you can backline them, blah blah. But it's not the same thing. So
yeah,
that's one of the. I guess that's why a lot of guys are now moving towards the more controller and virtual instrument route. And there's a lot of good reasons to do that, I think. Although I'm a Luddite, I think we've discussed this before.
Yeah, that's a nice segue though, Paul. Well, either intentional or unintentional.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So we better wrap up soon. So the last topic I'm going to cover today is we had a question from Brett Minkin. Brett, I'm not sure you're on the chat at the moment, but thank you for asking it. And that was, he was looking at buying a new Mac, or not a new Mac, buying a Mac to run main stage, wants to get into main stage. And the question was, well, what sort of Mac should I buy? Now, this is not going to be a satisfying answer as far as it is horses for courses. So, for example, I use a MIDI controller as one of my two boards. I use main stage, but I use very little of the soft synths in main stage. I essentially use main stage as a jumped up MIDI switcher, as far as I just use it to send MIDI control messages to my Modi X7 to change to the latest patch. And yes, I do have, for redundancy, soft synths for the Arturia MIDI controller that I have connected to main stage, so that if for some reason the Modi X died, and that did happen in the last couple of months due to my stupidity, not the Modi X, and I worked out what the issue was, I do have a backup keyboard using the laptop. So for that, the processor power pretty low and old. Some people rave about, say, the 2015 MacBook Pros. I know people using them as far back as 2012 MacBook Pros successfully with main stage. But you would, as a general rule, I would suggest newer the better. No, you don't need the M1 or the M2 Apple Silicon chips to run main stage, but gee, it takes a lot of the stress out of running computer hardware if you know you've got that. So I've got a 2022 MacBook Pro, M1 Pro chip, I think it is. I never worry about the CPU load anymore. I know that even if I'm running, 6 or 8 different soft synths in main stage, it's barely blinking running them. So the short answer is the newer the better, but we all have budget limits. If you know you're not going to overdo it too much, older MacBook Pros will work fine. Older MacBook Airs may run fine, but based on your hard drive space and the processor, I'd be a little bit more reluctant on that.
David, just a question, and this is coming from a person who doesn't operate this way. When you're setting up for this kind of thing, are you ensuring your computer is completely clean in the sense that it's exclusively being used just for this activity?
So I think ideally you do, and I have no doubt that's what the pros do. I don't have that luxury. So my MacBook Pro has everything on it, from my guilty pleasure of World of Warcraft through to, I have Logic Pro main stage, all the soft synths. I use it for word processing, Excel spreadsheet, you name it, I use it, right? So because it's an M1 MacBook Pro, I'm happy with that. And if it goes down at a gig, I've got redundancy built in. So, but yeah, ideally you would have it like that. I do make sure when I turn up to a gig, I turn off Wi-Fi and do things so I minimize the CPU load from that viewpoint. But yeah, if you're a pro, they absolutely do that. I just don't have that.
So if your band's playing like an AC/DC song or something, and you have to sit out, can you just fire up the World of Warcraft and level up a couple?
I'm glad you asked that, and we didn't play this before the show. So what I actually do is I entertain our drummer. So because I use a Radial KL8 as my audio interface, it has for each of the channels a Q button. So when I press the Q button, I can still hear what's coming through my in-ear monitors, but it's not going out through front of house or monitors. So what I do is do these really ridiculous classic, it looks like I'm playing classical music to entertain the drummer, doing all these flourishes and stupid stuff on the keyboard that doesn't even sit in the same key, to make the drummer laugh while the AC/DC song's being played.
So, I can't see that ever going wrong. There's no risk there of that sort of behaviour at all.
I'm always really careful. That's my biggest dread, that I start doing that, then everyone stops and turns around and looks at me, but I always check the Q button is on.
Very good.
So yeah, look, I think the reality is we all have to have our own, working day-to-day laptops that are used for main stage, but it pretty much works okay. So to give you just one very quick example, I'm involved with sort of running backing tracks and playing keys for an originals act, and I'll be running fairly complex backing tracks plus my own keyboards through a 16 in and out audio interface, and it's running flawlessly. on main stage. The backing tracks are just running as smooth as silk. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 soft synths running simultaneously, and on an M1 MacBook Pro, it's not blinking an eyelid.
Yeah, okay. So that sort of answers my question, I think, in the sense of a good, decent computer will handle this sort of stuff without too much trouble.
Yeah.
You mentioned a redundancy, David. What's the redundancy that you have? And I
Oh,
guess
purely just between hardware and software. So my Modi
yeah, right.
X7, obviously, I only, or Mainstage just switches between patches, but all the sounds themselves are coming from the Modi X. And then the top keyboard, the Arturia controller, is all soft synth. So it just means if one goes down, I've got the other. And that works quite well for me.
How
Joe
are you
just
going to
wrote,
handle that with your backing tracks and the originals, that because there's a bit of complexity there, I think, from
yeah,
what you're
so
saying.
no, it's a really valid point. I won't be able to do that. So what
Yep.
I actually will be taking gambling the whole box and dice on the laptop with that
Yeah,
one.
right. Right. Oh, I guess can you tap dance and juggle, because that'll be fine
That's
if it goes down.
right. That's right.
I think realistically, the chance of it going down is probably almost zero, right?
That's right. With the guests that we've interviewed, even if they are using standalone machines, and Joe's raised a good point too. Well, on Macs, and you can do the same on PCs, you can have different user accounts. So there's nothing stopping you setting up a user account on your laptop that has most of the other stuff stripped out, and it really is sort of a music only account. That's actually a great point. Actually, I now want to do that, Joe. I think that's a brilliant point. I can't believe I hadn't thought of that.
He'll do it too. Don't worry.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Joe. And Walter says M1. Look, the M1 chips, people might think it's overhyped, and Apple are certainly very good at hype. But going from the Intel chips to the M1 chips, it is just remarkable, the performance difference. So, for example, this podcast is streaming out on a Mac Studio, an M1 Mac Studio. I get so much better performance. I won't bore people with details, but there's a virtual camera running. There's the actual streaming software. There's YouTube live stream, and it all runs just flawlessly. And it does on other computers too. So, horses for courses. And the other thing we shouldn't forget is Mainstage is not the be all and end all. There's obviously Camelot for iOS, and then there's a Gig Performer for both PC and Mac. Yeah, I'm sure it's both. They are great. I know people that just swear by them and love them. I tried Gig Performer, just couldn't get my head around the interface, but I know other people just love it, and it's the absolute go-to one for them. Check them all out. That's my view. So there you go. And we might wrap it up there soon. But yeah, nice segue. And thanks, Brett, for the question. We just wanted to do a quick, early 2023 hello. We will do these. We'll try for once a month. It'll just depend on, as I said, we've got a lot of guests booked in, and we'd much rather bring you the guests because they're the really interesting people. We're just the talking heads.
For
Talking
sure.
Heads. There's a band I would play keyboards in. Talking Heads.
Yeah, I
Because
think that'd
again,
be
I
an
think I could
interesting
manage that.
experience. Yeah, I'm sure you could.
So it's lovely having you all on here, and it's great. Appreciate all of you that have joined us live. Those watching it after the fact also appreciate you doing it. I had one topic I was going to cover, but we do need to. No, let's quickly do it. Casio. When we're talking about keyboards, one things that stood out for me in 2022 and now into 2023, and I promise I'm not sponsored by Casio, so this is an unsponsored mention. They have really started hitting the pro market more than what they have over, say, the recent decade. And now Casio may argue they've always been in that market, but I think it has varied. Some of those new keyboards that they've released are perfect for studios and stuff. I'm trying to think. I've got it. So like that, the new, and I promise this is not sponsored. I've just got the web page up. So the PX S7000, just these beautiful 88 key, very compact pianos that have got good functionality. I just love stuff like that. I've never bought a Casio, and I'm actually about to pull the trigger on one. I'm tempted to pull the trigger on one. They're just beautiful pieces of gear. I don't know, Paul, have you seen any of them? One of them is called the PX S7000 in the color, and it could be a good band name, Harmonious Mustard. Harmonious Mustard. Sounds like a prog rock band. Ah, I just did all that talking with my mic muted, didn't I? No, there we go. I think we're losing our connection with Paul. Paul, come in, Paul. Can you hear us, Paul? He's looking tentative. All right, that's a good end to a live stream, and that's why it's live. And we don't have any redundancy built in for our platform. That's more impossible. So again, Tammy, Greg, Walter, who else we got? Joe, and whoever else has joined that hasn't jumped in the chat. Hugely appreciate you taking the time, and we'll be back with both the show and a live stream soon. Bye.